Don't call her cute, don't call her feisty. She's a rebel, she is nasty, she is brave. She isn't honey, sweetie, sugar pie, baby. And don't you ever say that she was well behaved. Don't you ever say that she was well behaved. And don't you ever say that she was well behaved.
But I wish I had gotten my tonsils taken out. I think I would get sick much less.
Last year I had a crazy thing, which was I had an ear infection.
Oh.
Which, you Google it, and it's, very rare in adults.
Yeah.
But I knew it was ear infection because I was bleeding out of my ear.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What?
It was last winter, shortly after I moved here. And moved back, rather. And it was something was wrong. It was very painful. But the moment, it was extremely painful. But then the moment where there was blood coming out of my ear onto my pillow, I was like, okay, well, this seems bad. So I called my grandpa because he's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And he was like, yeah, you probably have an ear infection. Which I also Googled. So I just went to urgent care and they gave me antibiotics and stuff.
Wow, I've never had
I was
blood.
crying from pain. It was really, really painful.
Was your balance off too? That's the tricky thing with ear infections.
I don't know. I probably didn't go. I didn't really do much, so I don't think I noticed that. I pretty much just Louis drove me to the urgent care, and then I went home and slept. But I was crying from the pain. It was so painful.
When I was younger, I used to get ear infections all the time to the point where I was constantly on antibiotics, and if I would go off of them, the ear infection would just come back.
Oh my God.
And then when I was 5, I started limping. Did I ever tell you about this?
No.
I started limping, and I had really bad pain in my hip.
Oh no.
And my parents just figured it's because I was learning how to ride a bike, and I had been falling a lot, and you're a kid or whatever, and I wasn't really complaining. I was just sort of limping.
Walking weird.
And then one day it was the day that we were moving from our old house to our new house, and I don't remember it very well, but I guess I just sort of sat down and then I wouldn't get back up, and I had a really high fever, and my dad had to take me to the hospital, and I had septic hip, and the doctors think it's because my ear infections were so strong and became antibiotic resistant, and then the infection it would go dormant and then travel, and it nested in my hip, and so I had to have I know. That's awful. Well, and now I have arthritis in my hip, so whenever the weather changes, I feel it in that spot, and it feels the same way it did when I was 5.
Wow.
From ear infections.
That's awful. Wait, it was in your hip bones? Or in the muscle?
In the joint.
Ew. What did they do? They just took the infection out?
Yeah, I had surgery, and they after the surgery, I don't know what they exactly they did, but after the surgery, I had a tube in my hip that stuck out so they could drain it. And then I was on crutches for 4 months.
Oh my God. How old were you?
5. I missed the end of kindergarten.
Yeah. Well,
who cares? You don't learn that much.
Yeah. Nothing that your parents can't tell you.
I already knew the alphabet.
Yeah, that's pretty much the gist.
I was pretty ahead of the curve.
Ooh.
And I read Charlotte's Web a lot.
Isn't it ahead of the curve?
Well, maybe I should have gone to more kindergarten.
Isn't it?
I don't know. Probably. That makes more sense because you get graded on a curve. Head of the curb.
That means you're getting hit by a car.
But you're ahead of it. So you're not getting hit by the car.
No.
Because the curb.
No, maybe
because the curb is there to it's there to stop you, right? So if you get ahead of it, ahead of that roadblock.
Okay, I don't think a curb is there to stop you. I guess it is.
Yeah,
the
it is.
car.
It's there to stop you from going onto the sidewalk.
Right, that's true. Ahead of the curve. It's curve.
Curve. Okay.
It's curve. Yeah. According to Google, ahead of or behind the curve. Ahead of or behind current thinking or trends.
Well, I'm in front of it by changing it from curve to curb. I'm changing the trend.
Curb
I'm ahead
your
of it.
enthusiasm.
Curb your enthusiasm. No, it is curb, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't remember.
I was trying to do a hot riff.
No. Did you You were at Trick or Treat, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I saw you there.
Yeah.
Rob Hayes' JB Smoove was
funny.
so good.
So funny.
I loved it so much.
So funny.
It was fun to watch Rob move around on stage because he's so low energy normally.
I know. He really
I loved it.
Amped it up.
It was really fun to see what people came up with.
That was fun. Yeah, I liked that show.
I loved Katie Hannigan's Madonna.
Oh my God, that was so good.
It was.
She's also
That might have
just
been my favorite
so
of the
beautiful.
night.
Yeah. Yeah, that might have been one of my favorites. I was up there. It was really good.
Trick or Treat is like this comedy show once a year. It happens around Halloween where comedians, we all like pretend to be a famous comedian. Like you imitate them and you do like 2 minutes as them and you dress up as them. And
Yeah, and some people do
whatever.
like their material, and some people just do material that's in their voice, and some people just do random stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Beck did Tim Allen and just pretended
Made
to do
noises
cocaine
and
and
did
grunted
cocaine. Yeah.
for 2 minutes.
Pretty much. It was great.
And it was so amazing.
Yeah. Well, that was good. I'm sorry. Ariel's falling apart. You guys missed that earlier
Yeah,
when we were talking
my
about
body
off
is really turning
Sorry.
its back on me.
I'm so sorry. That's awful.
It happens. I think this is like the 5th episode we've done where I'm like, I'm a little sick.
That's true, actually.
It happens a lot.
I'm actually sort of impressed that I haven't caught all of the colds that you have.
I know.
We
Only
do a
like
pretty
2.
good job of not like touching.
Yeah. It's hard for me, but it's for the best.
Thank you. We did have a cold at the same time a few weeks ago when we
Yeah.
yeah.
I know.
But yeah, anyway.
I know. I don't know. I twisted my ankle and I have a cold and I'm tired, but happy overall. I'd say.
Good. Listen, that's all that matters. Who needs an ankle when you have happiness?
I was walking with Liz the other day and we passed by 2 dogs, and with both of them I kind of like melted, and she was like, what is it about dogs? I was like, I don't know, they just make me so happy. And I realized there was this comedian on a show that I did from Philly, and he had this joke about how dogs, like, why they're so great, and it's part of it is like you never see a dog who's just like, man, yesterday sucked.
That, you know what's funny? Julie and I had a realization about dogs versus babies, because the kid that I babysit, the younger one that I'm with most of the day, he's 18 months, and he dressed up as a mouse for Halloween.
Aww.
And it was a friggin' crazy how cute it was. It made me die. I just like was dying. And his mom like posted pictures of it on Instagram, and I was like out that night, and I was like, oh my God, look at these pictures. He was like trying to eat a lollipop with the wrapper on because he doesn't know what candy is. He just he thought he saw everyone else eating it, so he was just eating it with the wrapper.
And he was
I'm
just
not
like,
really
this
eating
isn't
it,
very
but just like
good.
putting it in his mouth.
What's with all the hype?
Exactly. They're so dumb. I love them. Babies, that is. Anyway, so I was just like dying over these pictures, and I showed them to Julie, and I was like, oh my God. And she was like, this is how I feel when I see dogs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't feel that way about dogs. And she was like, yeah, I don't feel that way about babies.
Me neither.
But then the other day she texted me, she was like, oh, I just had an experience like that with a baby. And I was like, I've had them with dogs. Like, remember that dog at Corey Healy's house in Denver?
Yeah, that little chihuahua.
I fell in love with it. And it was like a furry, I don't think it was a chihuahua. It was like a
at
mix.
least part chihuahua.
Yeah, and
it was
like a furry chihuahua.
and well, I think that there are long hair chihuahuas.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
And it was just, it wasn't your stereotypical like yappy dog.
No.
It was just really friendly and sweet.
well,
and
like
kind.
I've said, I'm like a misogynist to dogs. I like dogs that are small and quiet.
Yeah, yeah.
Dogonistic.
Dogonistic.
Yes, I do love a small, quiet dog. That's my perfect dog, and I love
Massage a
them.
dog.
Which is also like a baby, which is what I like.
Yeah.
Really, I just like babies, I think.
I think I don't understand babies as much as well as I understand dogs.
Yeah.
Maybe that's.
I
what
don't
it is.
understand dogs. I think that's part of it. I don't know that I understand babies, but I mean, I don't know. There's not much to get. They're just like dumb little people. They're just like, kind of goofy, and they just get so excited about everything. And similarly to dogs in that way that you never see a baby that's like, yesterday was awful.
Yeah.
They have literally, like, the kid I babysit had like a scratch on his chin. He had fallen down, like, not with me, thank goodness, because I would have freaked out. But he fell, like, right when I left, when his dad came to get him, he like fell into a bush and like hurt himself. And then the next morning I saw him and I was like, oh no, like, did you get an hour? That's what he calls it.
Yeah,
Like, did you get an
that's
hour?
cute.
And he was like, what? And his dad was like, he doesn't remember.
Yeah.
He was like, he doesn't even know. It's like on his face, but he doesn't know. I'm like, cool.
Until he looks in the mirror.
Yeah. And even then he'll be like, whatever. Like, he doesn't. They're very easygoing babies. It's
Just real
nice.
chill.
And maybe not all of them are, actually. He is a particularly easygoing baby.
I used to babysit a baby who was not easygoing. And
That sucks. I mean, so
we
there's
did not
dogs like
work
that
out.
too, I'd say.
His mom just would always describe
Wait, is this the
him-
one you were babysitting recently? Or was it a while ago?
This was a while ago, I guess. I feel it was like last winter.
Mm.
Like
Weren't
last
you just
February or
recently
March.
babysitting someone? Maybe that's when I was thinking of, though.
Maybe. He was like a year and a half or two.
Yeah.
And
You just didn't get along.
we just didn't vibe right.
Yeah,
we
I've had
weren't
that.
the right mix for we weren't the
Dude,
right
I've had that. I was
And-
babysitting someone else recently, and it was like an older kid, and I just like didn't like him.
Yeah.
I didn't like him. He was a cheater. He like would
Ooh.
cheat on you couldn't hang out with him. The older kid in this family is great. He taught me to play chess.
Oh,
He'll
cool.
like play games and he'll follow all the rules. So it's like fun. You can play with him. You can do stuff. This other kid I was playing with, he was just like, he would cheat at all the games. He would be such a sore loser. He would try and trick me all the time. Like which kids do to some degree.
Yeah.
All kids do this a little bit. But usually, like, this kid was like insidious about it. He would just like always try and trick me and be like, my mom said we could watch TV. And then I'd have to be like, I have to call your mom because I'm pretty sure she doesn't think that. And then he would like, and then I have to call her and then like, she'd be like, no. And I'd be like, no. Like, it's just
Yeah.
like dumb, you know, like again, like they all kind of do that, but this kid was doing it so much. And it was like, and it felt, and then he would just like get grumpy and like never get over it and just be like mean to me. It was bad. I like the kids I work with now are just nice. They have good hearts.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure this kid who I didn't particularly vibe with did too. And
I don't know,
I
some of them are just
appreciate
people that
I
are
think
bad.
his mom no, he wasn't bad. He was just very sensitive.
Oh,
and
okay, that's different.
I am
Yeah.
not. And I think his mom recognized that we weren't the right fit for each other, and I respect that a lot.
Yeah.
But she was also very sensitive.
Yeah. Well, that's
And they were like, you know, like
it is a lucky match. Like I do feel lucky that the current kids I babies. I just feel like we just have a good. I feel like me and the parents are very like. I say we have similar energy. It's all a similar energy. It's like not too hard on things, but also not too easy on things.
Yeah.
In the middle.
I used to babysit in high school, and when I would come home from college, I would babysit my biology teacher's 3 kids, and they were the coolest, and I liked them so
Cool.
much. I think about them sometimes, and I realize like they're in high school now. Like,
my God.
One of them is.
I thought they'd be older than that. I guess not. What, they're
No.
like 10 years younger than you?
I mean, I think when I was a senior in high school, yeah, the oldest one was probably 7 or 8.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, she's in high school now. We're so old.
That's not that bad. Wait
No,
till
I
she's
know.
like 30.
Wait till I'm 30.
No, you'll be dead by then.
By 30, maybe.
From ankle, septic ankle or whatever.
Septic ankle, yeah. I think about if there's like a natural disaster or something, and then there's an epidemic that sweeps New York City after. Like, you know how like in Haiti there was the cholera epidemic
Yeah.
after. I think about those and how like, yeah, that's probably how I'll go.
You're going to get that.
It'll
for
be
sure.
disease.
You guys, diseases love you, dude.
I
They just
have
love
a
you.
very weak immune system.
You just got some sweet organs.
I'm very Jewish that way.
I will say I've been exercising more, and I wonder if that's been helping me with my ability. I don't know. I mean, knock on wood. We'll see when the winter actually comes, but maybe global warming will mean that it never does, which I'm honestly okay with.
It'll come.
I know.
We'll get.
This is pretty good though. This is pretty late for
Yeah,
it not
man.
to be. It's usually very cold by now, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's usually like how
I,
it
like,
was on
forget.
Halloween.
Yeah.
Like
And I mean, that was pretty bad, but that wasn't.
It was super windy.
That was like the
high
50s. Like even the 50s. Look, I don't love it, but the 50s. But once it gets lower than the 50s, that's when I start to. That's when it's just painful to leave the house. Like it is nope.
We should move to LA.
All right, I probably will soon. As I sit in my apartment that I'll never
And then
give
we'll
up.
figure out how to do this podcast. You're listening to Well Behaved.
Hi, I'm Molly Ruben-Long.
I'm Ariel Elias.
And
And this is the podcast about obscure women in history.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell you about them.
Yeah. Are you first? You're
I'm first.
You're first.
Ugh.
While you get your computer out. I will. I don't actually have anything to say.
You don't have to.
There are a lot of ways to do a long distance podcast. Also, my
Would we
mom's gonna
Skype?
like cry when she hears this. She knows I'm leaving soon. I mean, like not soon. Like probably within the year. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
All right. So I felt pretty embarrassed last week by my lack of knowledge about Ruby Bridges
Oh.
and just like the general process of integration in New Orleans. Like I think I talked out of my ass a little bit. And you know, a big part of why I like this podcast so much is just like recognizing and finding my blind spots in history, because like I just like didn't learn about it in school. They didn't teach it. Like they did
not Ruby Bridges.
We did not learn about Ruby Bridges in school.
What?
We learned about the Little Rock Nine, and that's it. Like when it came to
Okay, well that's
school
better than nothing. But
like I don't even know their names.
Kentucky.
Like we didn't learn, and
I don't know their names either.
I was
mean, I'm sure
talking
they
to
taught us, but, like, I don't remember.
I was supposed to do this show and I was canceled, but so I just went to a diner with like Liz McGee and Jen Welch and Sam Reddy, and we were all just like sort of talking about what we were taught about the Civil War, and it varies wildly from the four of us.
As John
because
Kelly said, it was just a problem of
about
lack of compromise.
You know, that's the big problem with our society. Oh boy,
this is a joke to that person who doesn't understand jokes.
It's a joke. Well, and you know, like Jen was, I think she's from upstate New York. Sam is from Pennsylvania, and Liz is from Florida, but like went to school in Maryland. And so Liz probably had the most comprehensive.
She did?
Until like middle school, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Like a boarding school?
No, she just like grew up in Maryland until she was like 12 and then moved to Orlando.
I didn't know that.
So
I just
she, like,
thought of her as a true Orlandoan.
Yeah, me too. She went through puberty in Orlando, so I think like that's sort of like where you're
Liz,
from.
I think really the true her.
And
that's crazy though. But yeah.
And we just sort of all compared notes of what we were taught about the Civil War. And like I very much was taught like it was about states' rights.
Yeah.
Like that, like period. And so I didn't like when it came to desegregation, like we were taught Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education, Little Rock Nine, and that's it. So I'm just trying to like recognize what I don't know and fix that.
Yeah.
So I just like was listening back to last week's episode and I felt just like embarrassed and ignorant. Aww. So I'm doing Leona Tate,
cool.
There were 4 girls who integrated New Orleans public schools, Ruby Bridges being the most famous, but there were 3 other girls and Leona Tate was one of them. And I'll mention the other 2, but like she was who I mostly focused on. So I'm going to do my sources first because I also forgot that last week.
Oh, okay.
It's No Louisiana, KNOW, the Times-Picayune, Amistad Research Center, Fort Worth Country Day, the Leona Tate Foundation.org, and Preservation Resource Center and WWNO. Okay. So we're going to take it back a little bit. The New Orleans public schools were I wasn't totally wrong when I said like it was desegregated and then segregated and then desegregated. So it was.
That sounded right.
Yeah. And I wasn't like, I basically just parroted what I had heard on a cemetery tour once from this woman. But she was right.
Okay.
So basically during Reconstruction, schools were pretty desegregated.
Oh, okay.
In 1867, the Louisiana Constitution stated that public segregated spaces were not allowed. And in 1870, schools were actively integrated. And the schools that were most active in integrating tended to be the higher performing schools. Go figure. But there was so much blowback from white people. And in 1874, despite how successful these schools were and despite how well they performed, there was a bill that passed where the clause in the Constitution that prohibited segregation was removed. So now there's just nothing in the Constitution. But in 1874, there was nothing in the Constitution that said anything about segregation. And then in 1879, segregation was explicitly permitted in the Constitution. So they're like, it's fine, you can do this. And then in, I wrote 1989, but I meant to say 1889. In 1889, integration was banned in the Constitution. So it went from like, you can't segregate to like, we're not saying anything to like, you can segregate to you have to segregate.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's important to see like that gradual erosion of equality, because it doesn't just happen in one fell swoop. It happens one foul swoop, one foul swoop, one foul swoop, one full swoop. No, I'm just making a joke. Curve it. But you know, it's just like this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It happens little by little, and you move the line of what you're willing to accept.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind in the coming years in the United States.
God. I know. Mine is also like a reflection of like, the United States has done terrible things. They can do it again.
Right. It also makes me think of, and this happens a lot with these stories, but like how different the country would be if Reconstruction had lasted, right? Like how
it's really the biggest FOMO, American FOMO of what could have happened.
And it feels similar to having
doors.
8 years of Obama and then sliding back, right? Like sliding back so far.
Yeah.
Because after Reconstruction came Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And there seems to be no greater symbol of that than like going from Obama to Trump.
Yeah.
But this isn't a political podcast. I mean, everything is political. And if it's not, congratulations to you on your privilege. All right. So in New Orleans, starting in 1951, the Ninth Ward Civic and Improvement League were like, okay, if schools have to be separate, we should be fighting for the equal part. Because at this point it was like Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. But black schools were overcrowded.
Which also was in New Orleans, Plessy versus Ferguson. That you got off the train. There was that like marker right in the Bywater.
Right.
I remember when I first moved to New Orleans and I saw, like, was taking a walk and I like saw that marker and I was like, whoa! And I like took a picture of it and sent it to my mom. I was like, this is so cool.
What did your mom say?
She was like, awesome. That's it.
So yeah, black schools at the time and still were overcrowded, underfunded, and falling apart, which is of course the main flaw in Plessy versus Ferguson, because if all of the policies of the country are designed to favor white people, then the institutions that uphold those policies are not going to be equal. So especially with schools, because schools are funded based on the taxes of that neighborhood. Right. So if you have a poor black neighborhood, you're going to have a poor black school.
Right.
There was a lawsuit at the time, Bush versus Orleans Parish School Board, that challenged the constitutionality of segregation and basically said, like, if you are saying that segregation is constitutional, then the school board has to uphold their part in making the schools equal. But before that could get ruled on, Brown versus Education happened. And that was in 1954, which of course declared that separate but equal was unconstitutional. And so the language in Brown versus the Board of Education that calls for desegregation in schools said with all deliberate speed. So a lot of people took this to mean like that should desegregation should happen immediately. But the Orleans Parish School Board took it to mean that they could take their sweet time with it, right? Like with all deliberate speed meant like we can be as deliberate about it as possible.
Man, legal language is so tricky.
So, I mean, yeah, it really is. And like the broad interpretations to fit your agenda is, pretty bold. So it wasn't until the NAACP took the case back to the Supreme Court that New Orleans was given a deadline of March 1st, 1960 to integrate. And did they meet that deadline? No. But to be fair, to this day, nobody in New Orleans ever meets a deadline.
That's true.
So it's not, this was because they were racist, but
it's also just because they were New Orleanians.
Yeah, nothing ever happens on time.
No. It's like that Chris Lane joke about how like if the revolution happens in New Orleans, like it's going to be delayed because someone needs to get the truck from Gretna or something. They're ongoing Gretna. It's like funny.
Yeah, there are a million reasons why nothing ever happens. But in the meantime, I mean, this was very deliberate. And while the legislator was trying to while they like are trying to extend this deadline, the state legislator was coming up with all these loopholes to prevent integration. So they're like, in total, they proposed 30 bills to make integration illegal, and all of them were ruled unconstitutional. But one thing that they did that was later ruled unconstitutional was intelligence tests. But of course, like the intelligence tests were for black students trying to attend white schools, whereas white students trying to attend black schools did not have to take intelligence tests. So it's already like
Doesn't make
bullshit.
sense. Yeah.
All right, now we're getting to Leona. I don't know how many kids took the intelligence test, and different sources said 5 kids passed and some said 6, but 4 of them, who were all girls, ended up integrating, and this set off what is known as the New Orleans school crisis.
Sounds like what they currently have is a school crisis.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like at the end of this, like Leona Tate ends up talking about how like in some instances schools in New Orleans are worse off now than they were before Brown versus Education.
Yeah.
So one of those girls, of course, was Ruby Bridges, who like went to school by herself, but the other 3 girls went to McDonough 19 together, and those 3 girls were Gail Etienne, Tessie Provost, and Leona Tate. So Leona talks about the first morning of going to McDonough. All right, so they're all 6 years old. They're all like going into 1st grade, because that was another
Why
thing.
did Ruby Bridges go by herself? Do you know?
She went to a different school.
Oh, it was just regional or whatever?
There were like transportation issues. Like that was one of the other bills that was passed about like trying to prevent integration, whereas like I couldn't find the exact like transportation restrictions, but there were all these like rules about where you could go.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know, was Ruby Bridges, was she from the lower 9?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because these 3 girls were, and at the time the lower 9,
I don't think she was, so maybe that's why. But I'm
yeah,
not sure.
at the time also the lower 9 was like, now it's always been a historically black neighborhood, but at the time it was more mixed.
Oh, okay.
So Leona is 6 years old, and like the way that they integrated school, like one of the things that New Orleans did was they did it by grade. So they're like, all right, we'll start with the kindergartners and 1st graders, and then like but year by year we'll do more, which is just another bullshit way of like
Not
making it harder. Basically,
Yeah.
It's like you get your freedom on our terms,
Right. And it's like, if you're already older, too bad. Like,
right? Exactly. We're grandfathering you into segregation, basically.
Yeah.
So Leona said that she was more or less kept in the dark about what exactly was happening and the implications of it. She talks about that morning that she first went to school at McDonough, where it felt like Christmas, because basically like her whole family came over, all of her extended family, like somebody was cooking breakfast for everybody, like she was being fussed over and like dressed up, and everybody was just like trying to be there to support her, even though she didn't really fully understand what was happening. But like she never felt afraid. She said like she didn't like read it off of her parents' faces. Like they were very like stoic and brave, and tried to make it
like a fun thing, like first day of school. Like,
yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then 2 U.S. Marshals showed up in a car to pick her up and escort her to school. And each girl they had a U.S. Marshal assigned to them for the rest of the year. So like the first day there were 2 that brought each girl to school, and then for the rest of the year, including Ruby Bridges, they had a U.S. Marshal pick them up from school and take them to school every day.
Jesus.
And it was always the same marshal. And they didn't say this, but I would imagine that it's so that like nobody can try anything, right? Like nobody can like pretend, like pose as a marshal to like kidnap them or hurt them. So it's like always a familiar face.
Yeah. Also, just regularity with a child is an important thing.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Just to have like some semblance of normalcy.
Right.
So she said, quote, "As we arrived near the school, the car slowed down, and everything I remember from that point seemed to go in slow motion. Somehow we were able to maneuver through a crowd of cursing, screaming, yelling people who were being held back by the police. I didn't understand why these people were being held back. The only reason I could think of was to keep them safe, so that the moving cars wouldn't hit them. It never dawned on me that I was the object of their yelling or that they were trying to get me." And she also said that at first, when she saw all these people, she thought it was a Mardi Gras parade because like that was the only context she had for crowds of people like yelling and police. Like she just thought it was Mardi Gras parade, and she was mad that she had to go to school and couldn't join in. And like in the car, she said like her mom told her to just like stay away from the windows, and she didn't realize until later that it was because like her mom was afraid of her getting shot in the car.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So all the white people outside, and you can like there's at the WWNO did like a, you know, they do like an interview with her, and they have audio from this day, and you hear all the protesters chanting like 2468, we will not integrate. And there's this interview with one of the mothers that like made me so mad because like you know, they ask her like, why are you here, like why are you against this? And she says like, basically she says like her concern is for like these little black girls having to go to school like 3 to 4 miles away from their own, like she just thinks that they should go to school somewhere closer to their home, which
an excuse.
Yeah, it's bullshit. It's just like this, it's code, right? It's code for like they should stick to their own. And it's the same thing that we hear of like it feels a lot like when people are like people who are against the NFL players kneeling, they're like, well, I just think that athletes should stay out of sport or should stay out of politics. Yeah. And it's like, no, you just think that athletes shouldn't stand up for a cause that they believe in on your time.
Tim Tebow got involved with abortion rights. He didn't stay out of politics. Do you want, like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right. So it's just, it's like, it's so infuriating. It's like, if you're racist, like,
I don't understand football very well, but there was a trending topic on Twitter this week that was about how like some team, I don't know anything about this, but some team accepted like some awful quarterback, even though Kaepernick is like still open.
Yeah.
And there was like all these tweets that were like, oh wow, they really are. Apparently this dude sucks. And they're just like, we'd rather just have this really shitty player than Colin
than
Kaepernick.
Somebody who actually like is an activist.
Yeah. Without the details on that, I know it's very vague.
I don't know them either. I mean, last night I was like hanging out with a bunch of people, and we were talking about just sort of like somebody said, you know, we were talking about how like the privileges you're afforded when you're white, and because you know there was also that report that came out that only 4% of TV writers are black. Yeah. And then there was the other report that like that other study that when 17% of the room is women, men perceive it as being 50-50. Yeah. So we were just talking about that kind of stuff, and somebody was like, sports are the only meritocracy left. And I was like, no. Sports is not a meritocracy. If it was, Kaepernick would have a job.
And also there was that thing about the girl who was playing golf. This was like a couple weeks ago. The girl who was playing golf with her, with like the boys golf team, and she beat all the boys on their field playing against them. And the like high school golf like association or whatever like wouldn't give her the award.
Oh my God.
And like wouldn't let her go to the finals because she was a girl, but she was playing with the boys
and better than them.
Yes,
it's Jackie Mitchell all over again.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, there is no meritocracy. It's all bullshit. Yeah. And like these girls passed a test that like nobody else, like they're better than you. Like
also, I love that it was all girls that passed it.
Me too. Well, and that's something else that comes up a lot in the civil rights movement.
Your voice is fading.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry. It's just, I can feel it deteriorating.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no. Do you want some water?
Yeah, I have. It's fine. But it's this like, it doesn't get emphasized, but like we saw it with like Claudette Colvin, and we see it with these girls. Just like women, and black women in particular, like
Girls even.
under the, like, these teenagers and these children. And I mean, to be fair, like, these girls were 6 and didn't really know, like, it was their parents. And like Ruby Bridges, like, her mom was the one who was like, you're doing this, and her dad was afraid. And it took her mom convincing her dad. It's like these women who are so courageous and like willing to stand up for what's right. So so Leona, Gail, and Tessie couldn't go straight to class. They had to sit on a bench outside of the office for a few hours. And they don't know why. And I kind of wonder if it was like going around making sure that there are no pipe bombs or whatever. Like, who knows? Or maybe they just had to like make things settle down. I don't know. But so eventually they are able to go to class. And Leona says, like, a lot of the kids, because they're 6 years old, a lot of the kids looked like they wanted to talk to them, but knew that they weren't allowed to for some reason. And, like, how hard that was. And one by one throughout the day, parents came to pick up their kids. And each time the kids would leave, all the protesters would cheer outside until eventually only Leona, Gail, and Tessie were left in the school. And, hold on.
Oh, like the parents would come to remove their kids, is that
to pick up their children, which is
like
also
during the day,
which is also like bullshit, because they clearly knew that these girls were coming, but they wanted to make a show of taking their kids out of school. And this also happened with Ruby Bridges, where all of the white parents pulled their kids out of school that first day. But at Ruby's school, on the second day, there was a white minister who brought his daughter to school and broke the boycott. He was basically just like, I just want to bring my daughter to school. Like, I just want her to get an education. I don't care about this. And that sort of like gradually, sorry, let me turn myself down. One by one, like at Ruby's school, like kids just started coming to school and things died down a little bit. But at McDonough, parents kept their kids out of school for the whole year. So the entire year, Leona, Gail, and Tessie were the only students.
Tight.
You know, it's kind of like, it's kind of great.
They like that protest is like, oh, so they get private education.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you just did.
With like, and
Good job,
they had
guys.
one teacher who like taught, who they said like seemed very comfortable teaching them. There was one exception in January of 1961. One white boy came to school, and there's like
like for the rest of the year.
No.
Oh.
So nobody knows his name, but he came to school until. Sorry, I just lost my place. Oh, here we go. But then when the protesters found out that there was like a white boy in the school, they all went to the Walgreens where his dad worked and surrounded the Walgreens until the little boy left and didn't come back.
Jesus.
So, I just wrote, how dare you? But Leona said like the school felt very safe when it was just the three of them. Even though the windows had to be covered with brown paper so that the protesters, who called themselves cheerleaders, couldn't look in and see where they were and like shoot them. They weren't allowed outside for recess, so they would just like
play in the gym or something.
They would play in the auditorium. They would go to different classrooms and like have lunch with different because all the teachers were still there. Just like doing nothing. And
well, were there other grades, like from all the grades they pulled them out?
All the grades they pulled them out. And the water fountains had to be turned off because they were afraid of somebody poisoning them. So for the whole year, these three girls could only eat whatever they brought with them from home. And the same thing happened with Ruby Bridges. She was only allowed to eat whatever she brought from home.
She had to bring like a thermos with water or something like that.
Yeah. Most of like the quote unquote cheerleaders were made up of housewives who just like had nothing better to do, I guess. Which is like another argument for feminism. You know, you give these women jobs and opportunities, and maybe they won't go to these like white supremacy meetings, which like there was some, I didn't write down his name because he doesn't deserve it, but there was some like well-known white supremacist who held a meeting that 5,000 people attended in New Orleans during this time. 194 people ended up being arrested for loitering, and eventually this triggered white flight to St. Bernard Parish, and the white population in the lower nine from 1960 to 1970 decreased by 77%. Wow. And that's when the lower nine became like pretty much all black.
Wow.
So white flight is there. And then, so this continued on. So like, basically it was a year and a half of this. It was like half of first grade and all of second grade that Leona, Gail, and Tessie are all going to school in this empty school together. And then in third grade, the school board decided that McDonough should just become a quote unquote Negro school. So rather than like having like forcing them to go, they were just like, fine, like you win or whatever. And
they made it an all-black school.
They made it an all-black school, which is still illegal, but like they did it. And then, but like these girls' parents were just like, fuck you. So they then had the three girls transfer to another
Different
white school.
Good for them.
This one was TJ Sims. But okay, so there was this oral history video that I watched of and all three women described this as the worst experience of their lives, was going to third grade at TJ Sims, because the U.S. Marshals weren't there for them anymore. And they're in third grade now, where like 8-year-olds are a lot meaner than 6-year-olds. They're like capable of hate. They sort of understand what's going on.
Wait, where were they for second?
They were
in
still
the all black McDonough?
No, they were still at McDonough, just the three of them. So like the deadline, like when they first integrated McDonough, it was like halfway through first grade.
Oh, so for a year and a half, basically.
Yeah. So
okay.
so the rest of first grade and then all of second grade, it was just them.
Okay.
Because like the deadline kept getting extended.
Right.
And also the school board thought that if they integrated in the middle of the school year, it would like
discourage them.
Yeah, it would discourage people from doing it. So it was very calculated and shitty.
Right. So this third grade experience was.
Yeah. So they said that they were beat up, they were spit on, they were called the N-word, and like a lot of the teachers would encourage it from the other students, including like the principal. And I think it was Gail who said like her dad would just write letters to the principal every time something happened, and like was just like, you know, like as Martin Luther King said, like we don't resort to violence. He was just trying to be like peaceful about it. But like the principal just would never do anything about it.
Wow.
Leona said, quote, "I wouldn't wish what we endured on my worst enemy. I learned to stand my ground while striving to do my best in school. As a child, I realized I was doing something different. As an adult, I realized the impact." So I could like, and then I can't really like, all three of these women are still alive. They're younger than my mom, which is also crazy and like, that's something that I know got brought up a lot when like, fucking Betsy DeVos tried to pull that shit about like Ruby Bridges. Remember she like, there was it wasn't really Betsy DeVos, but there was like a political cartoon that was depicting Betsy DeVos as Ruby Bridges in that Norman Rockwell painting. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because like Betsy was being followed around by protesters when she would go into these schools, and they were just like, oh my God, she's just like Ruby. And when that happened, there was this big, there was sort of like there were photos of Ruby Bridges today to be like, this was not that long ago. No. And like, how dare you try to take what she did and put it on like Betsy DeVos's heroism or whatever. And it is like a striking thing to watch the video, like these interviews with these women. It's like, yeah, they're younger than my mom and they look younger than my mom. Yeah. And they're just like, I forget very easily.
They probably look younger than us. I mean,
yeah, I mean, they look great. They really do. And so I don't like she went to I don't know where she went to college. Like I don't know what happened after third grade. But today Leona runs the Leona Tate Foundation for Change, which strives for equality by promoting educational opportunities. So she goes around and speaks to a lot of schools. New Orleans public schools today, in many cases, are more segregated now than they were in the 60s.
Yeah.
And New Orleans public schools are the lowest performing school district in Louisiana. So
which is probably means that they're one of the lowest performing school districts in the country.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the foundation's current goals, which I really love, is so McDonough 19 was closed in 2004. And then it was damaged after Katrina and just sat vacant for a really long time.
Do you know where it is?
It's in the lower ninth ward. I don't know where exactly, but
okay.
So one of the foundation's goals now is to buy the building.
Oh, and open a school?
Well, not exactly. So it's in 2016, it was put on the National Register of Historic Places, even though it was sat empty. So the foundation is trying to buy the building and turn it into a museum / community center / adult literacy center / office space for nonprofit organizations and
New Orleans,
I know,
so many slashes.
And affordable housing for seniors.
Cool.
So, I mean, it's a huge building.
Right,
like
so you could fit all that stuff.
You can do all of that very easily. And it's like, so if you want to donate to that, it's the Leona Tate Foundation.org.
Cool.
Is where you can do that. And it's Leona, Leona. I mean, you'll see it in the description. But, so yeah, like that's what she's doing now and still lives in New Orleans. And, yeah, she was just great. So that's Leona Tate.
That's a good one. Wow.
And,
she still lives in New Orleans?
Yeah. So does Ruby Bridges.
Oh, cool. Cool.
That's my girl.
Why would you leave? That was a good one. Cool. Well, my person is Miné Okubo. Okubo. She was born June 12th, 1912. She's a Japanese American who grew up in Riverside, California. Her parents were both born in Japan, but they came to the U.S. in 1904, originally to represent Japanese art at the St. Louis Exposition of Arts and Crafts. Her dad was a scholar and her mom was a calligrapher with a graduate degree with honors from Tokyo Art Institute. But once they got to the U.S., her father ended up working first at a candy shop and then as a gardener and landscaper, and her mom was a housewife and kind of didn't have a lot of time for her artistic pursuits, but she always encouraged art within Miné. I think I'm saying that right. Anyway, to pursue her art interest. It's spelled Mine with an apostrophe. So she encouraged her to pursue art. And Miné went to Riverside Junior College, and then she ended up getting a scholarship to UC Berkeley. She graduated with a BA in art in 1935 from Berkeley, and then got her master's in art and anthropology there a year later in 1936. While at school, she supported herself with a bunch of random jobs. She was a seamstress, a maid, a farm laborer, and a tutor. She was very successful at Berkeley. While she was there, she won this very prestigious fellowship called the Bertha Taussig Traveling Art Fellowship, which basically was going to fund her study, travel, and painting in Europe for 2 years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, super cool. So in 1938, she goes on this fellowship and she studies in Paris under an artist named Fernand Léger. Obviously, traveling to Europe in 1938, it's not
ideal,
the best time.
Oh yeah, I didn't even put that together.
Yeah. There's a lot of foreshadowing if you really think about what's about to happen.
Oh no.
Yeah.
And she's Japanese.
Yeah, there it is. You know where this story's going. So in 1939, the war breaks out while she's traveling, and she's in Switzerland, and she ends up being kind of stranded in Switzerland for a little while, but eventually she's able to sort of retain passage through France again and get on the last ship leaving Bordeaux for the U.S.
Shit. And she was born in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's an American citizen.
Damn it.
Yeah. So she ended up only getting to do a year and a half of the fellowship. She never got to do the last 6 months of the fellowship, unfortunately. So when she gets back in the U.S.,
They're like, welcome back. We're really happy to have you.
at first, yes. At first, right when she gets back in the U.S., she begins working with the Works Progress Administration's Federal Art Project, which, like, I just wrote LOL at this. Like, just the idea that there would be, like, a national arts, like, so much funding for, like, murals is, like, so funny.
Yeah,
now.
that was part of the New Deal.
No, I know, but, like, the idea of having that now,
Yeah.
like, artists never get supported in this country. But anyway.
They used to have, like, housing, like, upstate for unemployed people who, like, needed a break.
Really?
That's real. Like, for first it was just for men, and then Eleanor Roosevelt was like, you have to do this for women too, you fucking asshole. And they created these, like,
just in New York,
not just in New York. I think for women, the one for women was just in New York, but it was like, if you were unemployed, and for their requirements for women were more strict, but it was like, if you just, like, needed a place to go to recoup, you would, like, go to these camps and just sort of, like, rest and like, work on arts and crafts and stuff like that. It was this idea of, like, taking care of your mental health. Wow. Basically, and then, like, your food would be provided and stuff, and housing, and then you would go back.
But like a white people thing, huh?
Oh yeah, I mean, Black people were entirely excluded from the New Deal.
Oh, okay.
Like, none of the programs were extended to Black people.
Oh, but well, I guess she's Japanese, but she got like that worked, just not Black people.
Yeah, I mean, the GI Bill wasn't extended to Black people either.
Wow. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
It's bonkers. Ooh, baby. Anyway, so she does get, like, when she gets back, she's like, all right, well, there's a war, but I'll just paint a bunch of murals and get paid for it by the government. So she painted a mural at the Oakland Hospitality House and at Fort Ord. I don't know either, but whatever. I guess maybe they're still there. I don't know why. That was just on the thing.
Hey, Nathan Davis, go look at that. He's
maybe.
one of my
They're still there.
Oh, okay.
Google it first. Anyway, so in 1940 to 41, she also curated 2 exhibits at the San Francisco MoMA, where she showcased the work that she made while she was in Europe. So she's like, doing pretty good. She's like kind of like a successful. She's like an artist who's like making it happen, you know?
Yeah, like a TBS Comics to Watch type artist.
Exactly. She is an artist to watch in 1941. Then Pearl Harbor happens. December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, and 10 weeks later...
Trump's there. No.
He's at Pearl Harbor right now?
Yeah.
It's not December. What's he doing there?
I don't know.
I hate him. Anyway, so then 10 weeks later, on February 19th, 1942, Roosevelt signs an executive order 9066, which basically...
saying everybody should be treated equal and we shouldn't stereotype.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. So the wording of it was basically that it allowed the removal of any or all people from, quote, military areas as deemed necessary or desirable. So basically, then they just defined the entire West Coast as a military area.
Right, because it's like right next to Asia.
Which is where all the Japanese people, most of the Japanese people were. And basically the rationale, this is cuckoo bananas, but the rationale was that if all these Japanese Americans weren't in these busy cities and like close to the coast, if they were in more like remote areas, they couldn't be spies and they couldn't help Japan. Okay. So, so bad. I mean, this is like, it's so cuckoo how this.
Yeah, the lack of logic.
And also just how this just happened. How this happened and like nobody stopped it. It's like so wild.
Yeah.
It's so wild. Anyway, so, and also it's just like it's happening while we're like fighting the Germans because they have camps and it's like we're doing it. We're doing it too. I mean, we didn't try. They were like slightly better than concentration camps because we weren't trying to exterminate Japanese people, but still not great.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they by June, over 110,000 Japanese Americans, which 2/3 of which are U.S. citizens, are relocated to remote internment camps, which were like very quickly built by the U.S. military, shoddily built across the country in like remote areas.
That could never happen today because today they would be built by prisoners.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I was explaining to somebody last night about how in New Orleans after Mardi Gras, the people who do the cleanup are prisoners.
Yeah.
And they were shocked by it. And I was like, yeah, you should be shocked. You should be disgusted.
Yeah.
But like, that's what happens.
Yeah,
like
it's
they
really crazy.
bring out the prisoners to clean up the streets.
Yeah. Oh God. Anyway, so these last for about 2.5 years overall. But anyway, so Miné and her family are forced to vacate their home, and they were separated during the relocation. I saw one source that said she has never been to Japan and she does not speak Japanese. She was born in America.
Yeah.
She's been to France. She's been to Switzerland, but she's not been to Japan. So anyway, her and her brother are sent to the Tanforan Relocation Center, which is basically a former racetrack in San Bruno, California. They had
now it's a racist track.
Yay!
Hey, I might be sick, but
another one.
Still sharp.
So they shared a 20-foot by 9-foot horse stall that smelled like poop, and they had to sleep on sacks of hay. They're later transferred to the Topaz internment camp in Utah. She continued her art there despite the best conditions. And then just to like get a gist of like what life was like at these camps. So basically they were like, as I said, very shoddily put together, like, you know, it was sort of built like cell blocks, like big camp, you know, these kind of like camp things.
Yeah. And they're living in a horse stall.
Oh no! They get moved to a different place.
Okay.
So they're at first all the Japanese people are moved to these like holding areas, which are usually like old horse stalls or like other converted things. And then they move them to the actual camps.
Okay.
And there were 10 of these camps, all in like different states. Like hers is Topaz in Utah. I think they're all national landmarks now, but when I was Googling, there's one that's in California that you can visit, but it's in like Eastern California. It's like in the desert. Like basically they just put them in like shitty remote places. Like I think there's one in Arizona, they're just like all kind of over the place, but you know, in remote areas. And so once they got there, they were still like very cluttered and very unsanitary, and like disease spread really quickly because there were so many people so close. The War Relocation Authority did provide education through high school, but the facilities were awful. Like the school, quote unquote, schoolhouses were built with like no windows, no ventilation, so they would get super hot, and they were extremely overcrowded. The average student teacher ratio in the country at the time was 28-1, and in the elementary schools in the camps it was 48-1, and the high schools was 35-1.
It's like New Orleans public schools.
Yeah, it is. So they were also required to take Americanization classes.
Oh boy.
Which would basically like help them reassimilate once they got out and like tell them how great America was, even as they are being imprisoned by America. Jesus. So that was funny. Organized sports was like a big way to get over the monotony and sort of the depression. So they would organize a lot of baseball games and like football games, and this was like a huge deal. Work was not required of the adults, but most adults wanted to work because it was something to do, and also eventually they would get paid. In the beginning, they weren't paid to work, but later they were, and the rates would kind of depend on the job. But whatever they were doing, they were getting paid way less than like what the average was. Or even like on site, there were Caucasian workers as well. Like there were Caucasian teachers that would come and work on the camp, and the Caucasian like there's an example of one camp where the white teacher was getting paid $2,000 a year and the Japanese teacher was getting paid $228 a year. Jeez. So they're like they're basically like they create these little like societies in these camps. Like, so I never really knew much of like what this was, but they would have their own like fire department, police department, like medical center, all like staffed by the Japanese, like these little like there were these sort of like makeshift, like almost like ghettos or something, these little like these weird makeshift communities. So they would have like little like schools and they ended up doing a lot of like gardening and farming, and like they would, by the end, by 1943, the camps were producing 85% of their own vegetables.
Oh, wow.
And they would like, so there was one that was like had like cows that they would make dairy and meat, and a lot of them would have chickens and pigs.
It's like
and
pretty
stuff like that.
interesting how if you get a group of people together, like they will organize.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell how much of it was like structurally organized. I mean, I think a lot of it was them doing it, but like also there were like, it's like this weird, from the government, it's like this weird thing where they're like treating them, I think they were treating them sort of as like prisoners of war or something. So it was like they weren't, they like were giving them some like dignity in terms of like they weren't entirely, I mean none really, but it's weird that they set up like education for, I didn't know that, like I didn't, it's like that thing we were talking about last week where it's like when you can see that, when you like humanize these people enough to give them like a little bit of dignity, but then overall you're like taking them, you force them out of their home. It's like so weird to like
I wonder
do
if
those
it's
things
like,
at the same time. I don't know.
If it's sort of like how you can sleep at night. If you're like, well, we're not
we're
sure
not too
we're
bad.
sure we're interning them the way that like the
but we just had
the
to do
people
it
who
for
are
the safety of America.
we had to do
or
it for the
whatever.
safety of America, and like conditions aren't as bad as over there, you know, like we're still
Yeah.
treating them better than the Germans are treating the Jews. Like we're not
Right.
we're not total monsters. Like
Right.
we still provide resources for these people, so it's not so bad. Like you can't, and it's like, no, it is that bad. Like
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. It's such an absurd thing that happened in this country like not that long ago, and it's just, I feel like it's like I didn't really know much about it. Like I knew we interned Japanese people, but I was like very happy to not happy to read about it, but I was happy that I know about it now, because I feel like I didn't really know much. That's something I didn't learn about in school, really. I mean, they would say like we interned Japanese people, but I didn't know like what did that mean. Like they literally posted things in Japanese neighborhoods all along the West Coast and said you have to leave your house, and they forcibly removed Japanese people, Japanese Americans, just Americans with Japanese ancestry, from their homes. They were like, you're Japanese, leave. Like, and also I'm like, I mean, like, maybe there wasn't a ton of like mixing or whatever, like mixed race kids, but I would need to research further to figure out like if there was like a half Japanese kid like with a white parent, like what did they do then? Like it was just such a mess. So anyway,
I only know about it because there was an episode of the Babysitters Club.
Oh really?
Where I think it's Stacy is trying to get her neighbors to like sign some petition, and one of her Japanese neighbors, who's like a little older, won't sign it. And she's like, why? She's like, the last time I put my name on a list, my whole family was like arrested and moved to one, like my whole family was interned.
Yeah.
So I'm terrified of like putting my name on any registry.
Wow. Yeah, I guess it was maybe it was census based. That's another thing. If you know, please email us at wellbehavedpod@gmail.com. Ooh, someone's having a party
Jesus.
outside. But yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly how they like got everyone, or how they knew how they organized that process. But anyway, but they did just, so anyway, so Miné, like while she's in the camp, she does continue her art. Oh no. Can you?
Oh, geez. Okay, here, I'll pause it real quick.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Press and play
It
again.
stopped right away. It was an
Great.
alarm. Anyway, so she continues her art while she's there, despite the rough conditions. And she organizes an art school both in the temporary place at Tanforan and at Topaz. She organized these like art schools with a Berkeley art professor named Chiura Obata. Who was also, and other artists who were also interned. And they provided art lessons for children, adults, and senior citizens. She also worked as an illustrator for the Topaz Times while she was living there, and helped produce a literary magazine called Trek that was created at Topaz. She would draw the covers and was also the art director for the magazine. And so she just like kept doing her art while she's in the internment. She also drew over 2,000 drawings in charcoal, watercolor, pen, and ink, depicting her everyday experiences. And these are probably like the thing that she's most famous for,
Yeah.
which is because the use of cameras was the rules about whether or not cameras could be used in the camps kind of changed a lot over the course of the 2.5-year time where Japanese Americans were interned. And so there are some photos, like Ansel Adams was allowed to go in at one point, and there are photos from inside of it, but for a lot of the time, cameras were seen as contraband and stuff like that. So because when she was first there, especially, there was no cameras allowed, she just decided to draw everything she saw. So she just drew sketches of like all of her everyday experiences. So I'll get back to those in a second. But anyway, in 1944, Fortune magazine sees her work with Trek, that literary magazine that they made, and hires her to become to work for them. And this is about 2 years. She's been doing it for 2 years. So basically they're able to get her out of the camp. I don't know. It's all kind of almost over. Like a few months later, it was about to end. So I think it was like they knew it was coming to an end. And the war had, ended.
Yeah. At what point, like, did the camps, the internment camps, did those end when the war ended, or did they keep them there after?
They officially, like, they were declared that they would end December of 44.
Okay.
And then January of 45 is when they actually could, like, leave.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly when. I know World War II ended in 44, but I don't remember the
It ended in
month.
45.
It did?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
D-Day.
Okay. What was
Whenever
that?
Hitler killed himself. That was the that was the end. I'll look it up. You keep talking.
When did we drop the bombs on...
That was in 44. Oh, boy.
Okay, we're going to Google it. Anyway, you Google
Again, the blind spots.
it. I mean, look, we're not historians. We're just people. Anyway, so, but it's all kind of like wrapping up. And so I don't know exactly how Fortune got her out of there, but like, they were like, we want to hire her. And then they were like, okay, you can hire her. So they sent her to New York City. Also, now that I'm realizing it, if she's going to New York, that's not a quote unquote military area.
Okay,
So-
sorry.
Oh, yeah.
The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were August 6, 1945 and August 9th, 1945.
Interesting. Okay, well, they let people out of the internment camps in January of 45.
Huh.
So I don't know. I mean, I guess they just were like, this isn't really a useful policy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They were like, we regret this.
Yeah, I don't know quite how that worked, but they were let them out at that point. Anyway, so her first assignment was to provide an illustration for an article about Japan.
The country she had never been to.
She never do. So, and then shortly after that, she is like encouraged to and decides to publish a book with 206 of those over 2,000 drawings that she had depicting the everyday life and experiences of living in this camp. The book is called Citizen 13660, which was the number given to her by the government.
They weren't tattooed, were they?
No, I don't think they were tattooed.
Okay.
I don't think they were tattooed, but they were just given numbers.
Okay.
But it is like hauntingly similar to.
Yeah.
It's like concentration camp light. Like they weren't trying to like they weren't trying to exterminate the Japanese.
Like it's still going to kill you, but a little slower.
Right, exactly. Exactly. It's damaging in a much slower rate.
DCC, baby.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, it's definitely, it's crazy how like it's a similar and it's again it's not, they're not trying to, I think the thing about the German concentration camps was that they were very clearly trying to kill all of the Jews, which was not the intention.
Well, they were trying to kill all the Jews and also use them as labor.
Right. And that wasn't quite what was happening. It's like they really were just trying to like put them in, but go over there for a second because we're nervous about you because of your race, which is like very bad, but not quite as
yeah. But it's almost like, yeah, I get it. Like the motives, like the intention was different, but like do we know how many people died in the internment camps?
I don't know. No. I could Google that.
Yeah.
You want to Google that while I finish? I mean, I know that there was a lot of like disease easily spread and stuff like that because it was just, and also they were like people with like houses and comfortable lives, and then they were like forced into this like weird poverty like for no reason. It was just very. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of like. I'm sure there were like deaths from disease, but I'm sure there were also just like stress related illnesses and stuff like that. From this like weird trauma. But anyway, so This book, Citizen 13660, was like the first published firsthand account from an internee. And so for a while then after that, that was like very successful, and that's probably like her most well-known thing. And I would encourage you to Google image her work. It's really cool. It's like, it kind of reminds me of like, it's like that sort of genre of like sort of a cartoonized like thing about a tragedy, like Mouse or Persepolis or something like that, where it's like, and her drawings too are very, I mean, I don't want to, I'm not an art critic or an artist, so I don't want to use like words that are in any way offensive, but they're really like beautiful and expressionful. They're full of expression, expressive, that's the word. and really intricate and like really cool, but it's interesting, like a lot, it is very almost cartoony in a way, and it's really cool that like it's a little like it's not exactly realistic, and so it's sort of this light, sort of this, the drawing feels kind of light, but then the content feels so heavy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of this like almost
that
it's all like round and
like,
it's cool. Anyway,
I can't find a number, which also might mean that it's probably way more than estimates, right? But there's attempting escape, resisting orders, and treason were all punishable by death in internment camps. Wow. Guards would face little consequence for killing without just cause. Yeah, I mean, they were like, to also give you a idea of them, they were like covered in barbed wires with like armed guards with the guns facing in. Like, they weren't like it wasn't like a commune. It was like they were forced there, you know, so. This is sort of like a Yahoo Answers kind of thing, but it says like the WRA, which I don't know what that stands for, but
Workers' Relocation Association.
Recorded 1,862 deaths across the 10 camps. But, you know, wow, who knows? And that's 1,600? 862. Yeah, and that's, you know, over 100,000 people. Anyway, so after that book was published, she ended up working as a freelance and commercial artist for many years until she became a full-time painter in 1951. During that time, she was featured in Time, Life, and New York Magazine, and she also illustrated a bunch of children's books. So she was just like a pretty successful artist. She spent a year back in California as a art lecturer from 1951 to 1952 at UC Berkeley, but then moved back to New York. And in 1981, there was a commission on wartime relocation and internment of civilians created to seek apology and restitution. She spoke before the committee about her experience. And then in 1988, under Ronald Reagan, Congress passed the Civil Liberties Act, which recognized the illegal removal of people of Japanese ancestry from their homes. And internees were each rewarded a tax-free $20,000, that's also crazy to me that we've done that and there's been no such thing for slavery. Yeah. That's really, really crazy. I mean, this is awful, but it was 2.5 years and they were still able to work. And I mean, look, it's hard to compare tragedy, but it's like, look, they deserve, this was the right thing to do. They should have definitely done this. But it's so crazy that we were able to do it for this and not do reparations for the ancestors of slaves. Right. That is truly awful. That was hundreds of years. The foundations of this country were built on people that were owned as property. It's so wild. Why do you think that is? Do you think it like... Maybe it's... I don't know. Like, I don't know why. Racism, or I think it's. I think. I don't know. I think partially. I think maybe there's a bunch of reasons. I think one. Yeah. I don't know I don't know the history of like how much organization has gone into the idea of reparations. I think maybe it was like slight. Again, I this is all speculatory, but. Yeah, we are like two white girls trying to figure this out. I don't know. And I don't know the history well enough. I mean, like there's one, when I was like, oh, they created a commission. Like, so prominent Japanese Americans, like after internment, I think rallied really hard around fixing, like around some sort of retribution around this. And I think that comes from a place where it's like, oh, they had like sort of
medium status within society before this, and then they have medium to high status in the society after this, like, and so they have the sort of political clout, I think, to some degree, not entirely, but like,
sure. And it's also like
it's like, whereas slaves right after slavery ended they didn't have political clout to be like organizing a response.
Right.
Although there were a lot of like African Americans in Congress
still,
for a
but
while.
even like,
I don't know.
I mean, even today, it's like, look, if you just look at a neighborhood where, it's like if a black family moves into a predominantly white neighborhood, the value of those homes automatically goes down. Like, it's fucked up, but that's how it's valued.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's the same thing that happens if an Asian family moves into a white neighborhood, which maybe it does, but I think that the racism ingrained in this country when it comes to Black Americans is so,
that's our original sin,
it's so strong and so what's the word I'm looking for?
It's like impenetrable.
Backed by it's just like the institutions that exist in this country in large part exist to be racist against Black Americans.
Yeah. Even to the degree where sometimes you would, read things about Jim Crow South where, Asian Americans or Latino Americans or like there was the one I did with, who was it? The woman I did, who I watched the documentary about. Anyway, she told that story about when she was a white woman who was like a civil rights organizer in the South, and I'm forgetting her name.
Was her first name Mary?
I think it was Mary. But anyway, she was in a car with like a Pakistani guy,
right.
And they like didn't know what to, they don't know what to do with him. Like, it's like confusing, whereas like it's so ingrained to be black and white that sometimes like other races like screw up the system in terms of like how someone thinks about it or whatever. So I don't know.
Right. I mean, every power structure in this country is designed to benefit white people.
I guess it is crazy, though, that we can't do reparations. And so many people think reparations are just such a crazy idea. And it's like, we did it. We did it for Japanese Americans.
There's precedence.
We did it already. And it's like, for something like this is so much like more ingrained in our society, and so much more needs to be healed. I mean, no, both things are like, again, this is the right thing to do.
Again,
for
not
this.
like, it's
not
it's
saying
hard
it's like
to not
it's hard
compare.
to talk about it, but it's like, yeah, if we're doing this for this, then like, why are we not doing it for that? That doesn't make any sense, So it's I didn't know
it's
that
almost as
about
if there's no logic in racism.
Yeah. Ugh, God, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating and angering, and I mean the whole thing, and just that this can happen. I mean, and also just that there were like, people, while this was happening, while Japanese people were being interned, Japanese Americans, were being interned, all their neighbors and friends, and nobody did anything. Nobody stopped it. It just happened.
And that's what happened in Germany.
And that was 50 years ago. Yeah. And I mean, part of me wants to say, and it just feels so easily like something that could happen to Muslim Americans or Mexican Americans.
Absolutely.
Today. It just feels so much like
or
that could
somebody
happen.
who looks Muslim or who looks Mexican.
But that sort of, however, I don't know however they would verify who's who and what, but it just seems like a policy that could literally go into play. And I do hope that the country has moved left enough in its majority, even though the electoral college doesn't reflect that, that's not going to happen. When there was the Muslim ban and stuff like that, like there has been a lot of social activity around it, but it's just so disappointing. It's also that when you're in war, it's so, people are so much more hesitant to like, not like, people are more willing to take civil liberties away.
Yeah, totally.
Really
it's like used as an excuse.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we're about to see that after that guy ran his car into the bicycle lane, of like using that as a justification for like for ending civil liberties for
a certain segment
for
of the
people.
population,
And it's like, I mean, look, I am optimistic and very hopeful that in this country, at least, like, even though as a whole a lot of our institutions seem to be failing us and going backwards, that the individual people seem to be looking out for each other a little more. I mean,
Yeah.
like, even like that, you know, like the time on the subway when the subway car was filled with swastikas and everybody took out their hand sanitizer and
washed
washed them
off.
away.
Yeah.
Or like in Portland, and it's really tragic, those guys who were killed because
Yeah.
they saw somebody harassing a Muslim woman and they interjected, and it's like very tragic what happened. But I think the way that we have to look at that is like, they did the right thing and we should all be willing to do that.
Yeah.
And just like keep an eye out for your neighbors and like watch what's happening.
Yeah. It's just so crazy.
Because like it
I
can
don't know.
so easily just happen.
That question of like, I mean, look, we're not, I would love to talk to like a African-American history scholar or someone who has, I wonder if there's someone whose intersection academically is internment and slavery or something. I would love to know what like a professional historian's reasons are for why reparations never happened, especially given the fact that, and then I didn't know this. I didn't know that this happened the year I was born. I didn't know that we had given reparations to Japanese Americans.
It also, I mean, in Germany, there were reparations to Jews.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of like when
it's just really why
it's one of those things where it's like that one in particular, you know, it's like when HBO announced that they're going to do that Confederacy show, and there were people who were like, okay, why is Man in the High Castle okay, but this isn't? And it's like, well, because the countries that were responsible for the Holocaust have made an
literal
effort to
reparations.
reckon with it
Yeah.
and to accept it. And in the US, like, we have not reconciled with how, I mean, you can see it when John Kelly says that the Civil War was because there was a lack of compromise. You can just see it, like this rewriting of history.
Kelly? What's the compromise?
We
the
could-
compromise
yeah.
is that the South would just still have slavery and they would be a different country. What is the compromise? The compromise rests on slavery. And
Yeah.
I was listening to Pod Save America this week, and Dre McKesson was saying that which I want to go listen to this, but he was saying that there's a like the literal like Constitution of the Confederacy said like this is based on slavery, basically.
Yeah, the
like,
Cornerstone speech.
the Cornerstone speech. Yeah.
I was
So
listening to that this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like literally just says that. It's like, why?
Yeah, it could not be clear.
Why?
Why was I taught that it was complicated? It wasn't. It was
No.
so simple.
I mean, yeah, it's about states' rights to have slaves.
Right.
Yeah, sure. You got to finish the sentence. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what are you? States' rights to do what? States' rights to do what?
Yeah.
States' rights to have.
To treat black people as if they're not people. Like
no,
that's it.
It's so
That's
bad.
it. That's really it.
Everything's bad.
Okay.
Anyway, this was an intense one.
Yeah, it was. Say her name one more time.
Oh God, is this a challenge? Because
Sorry, no.
it's okay.
I just
Miné Okubo.
great.
Miné Okubo.
Okay, and
I'm
now
sorry if I'm butchering that. She's very talented, and her art is really beautiful. So.
and if you have anything that you want to add, like if you know.
Oh wait, my sources.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
definitely add stuff. Email us at wellbehavedpod@gmail.com.
Or you
My
can tweet at us at wellbehavedpod.
Yes.
We have an Instagram now too.
Yeah,
That
at
Molly
Wellbehaved
started. Thank you for doing
Pod.
that.
No problem.
And also we have a
That's dope.
Facebook page where like if you want to continue a discussion or if you have questions or if we said something fucked up, because like we're going to make mistakes and we acknowledge that and we want to be called out on it nicely, please. Then yeah, please do.
Let us know.
Or-
Sources, history.com, which is the History Channel's website, National Women's History Museum website, and the Digital Public Library of America.
Great. Every week we try to pick a Wonder Woman.
I actually have one too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
If this is your first time listening, it's somebody who's like making history today kind of thing, like somebody who we just want to acknowledge who's like done something this week. So also if you have suggestions, like if there's somebody in your life or whatever who you want to like highlight or give a shout out to, you can email us that too. Who's yours, Molly?
Mine is, I don't know if this counts, but basically I watched that documentary on Netflix, One of Us.
I haven't watched it yet.
It's the documentary about
Yeah.
Hasidic Jews, and it
very
is
excited to watch it.
very hard to watch. It's so disturbing and so upsetting. And I just wanted to shout out there's basically, if you don't know about it, it's called One of Us on Netflix. It talks about 3 people trying to get out of the Hasidic community, or who have gotten out or who are trying to get out, which only 2% of Hasidic people leave the community, and they make it extremely difficult on a number of levels about how to get out. So anyway,
it's a cult.
It's a cult that's a response to the massacre of 6 million Jews, but it is a cult and it's tough. And like most cults, it's not great, especially for women. And the woman who's featured in it, her name is Eddie, and she leaves this group and is like really working to get to see her 7 children ever again, even though Hasidic Jews have found a loophole in the legal system that allows them to basically keep a hold of any kids of anyone who leaves the community, even though her husband was physically abusive and a rapist to both her, and not a rapist to her kids, but I don't think, not that that's not brought up also with a different person, but anyway, so she was just really an impressive person to me, because she left this community after so much trauma and has to like fight for her 7 kids, and it's still not a perfect solution. It's very angering, but I just feel so grateful that I wasn't born into that community, or any community like that, any extremist religious community that is about, repressing women's voices and repressing women's importance in the world. And she's just super inspiring, and you should watch the documentary. It's real troubling and real good. Anyway,
great. Okay, I have 2. One in a similar vein, and I think I'm saying her name right, Asia Bibi.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see this story? She's a Pakistani woman who murdered her husband and her husband's relatives because she was forced into marriage back in September. She then tried to run away back to her family, and they returned her to her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And so she poisoned his milk. He didn't drink it. So then she made that milk into like a yogurt drink and served it to him and his family. And they died. And I know it's like...
maybe not the best solution.
I know that's like not exactly like a hero, but it is sort of like, well, what do you... like, what were her options?
What are her options?
Like, what could she have done?
But is she gonna go to prison now?
Yeah. I mean, they arrested her. She'll go to prison, and like, look, she should. You can't just murder people and not have no. But the I want to be careful about like my wording here exactly, and maybe I've just been listening to a lot of Misandry with Marsha and Ray.
Yeah.
But I kind of admire somebody who took her life into her own hands.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one. It's tricky because she wasn't given any option.
It reminded me of Foulon Debbie.
Yeah,
who we covered before.
Yeah, except was this guy raping her? I mean, probably.
Well, it's hard to really like get any information on her story, but it seems like he was abusive.
Yeah, probably.
I feel like you don't just like try to kill somebody who isn't generally.
Yeah.
And it's not as if that was her first move, right? Like she tried to leave.
She tried to leave. And
she tried to go back, and it's like, I also don't want to judge another culture's traditions, like, like arranged marriages and stuff. But I do think it's interesting that like this stuff happens where
I have a problematic view on this.
Women,
I probably shouldn't say on the record. I just feel like, and this is all religion to me is really tough. It's really tough. I wasn't raised with it. I don't get it. And the ways in which most of the major religions systemically oppress women.
Right.
It's hard for me to feel respectful of it when it's not a choice. If it's a choice, it's a choice. But if there's no choice, then it's not okay. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Yes,
like, it's like,
I know what you mean.
You can, if you're choosing to be Orthodox Jewish, if you're choosing to wear a hijab, if you're choosing to be a Mormon and have multiple wives, if you're choosing to be a religious woman and never have an abortion, a Christian woman never have an abortion, if you're making this choice, if someone says you can do either one and you make the choice, then God bless you, do what you want to do. But if there is a system that is telling you have to do that, it makes me very uncomfortable, and I have a hard time respecting it. Well, and I have a hard time thinking that it's anything other than an oppressive thing. And I know that that's on me, maybe. I don't know.
But they also almost entirely are oppressive towards the women.
Yeah.
Like there's no clause in Mormonism that says women can have multiple husbands.
No.
So it's this idea of
it's always about choice for me.
And it never seems like when in arranged marriages, when the man decides to leave, I feel like you don't really hear very many stories about the woman throwing acid on the man, to disfigure him. It's always the other way around, and it's always in favor of the man. Yeah. And so to me with this case, it was just I feel like, and I don't know the case extensively, and I'm not saying murder, but I am saying that
she did something when she had nothing to do. She found agency within a lack of agency.
Exactly.
And that's interesting. And it's maybe if you gave her another option, she wouldn't have done this.
Yeah, and she's going to be in prison either way, right? She's either in prison with her husband,
you're right,
or she's in prison within the system.
Right.
Again,
so maybe not the best move of killing people, but
so I'm not saying murder people, but I am saying good for her.
This is going to be a very problematic episode.
It's fine. History is problematic. My other one is and she was on Pod Save America, but Chrissy Houlihan is running for U.S. Congress in Pennsylvania. If she wins, she will be the only woman in the House from Pennsylvania.
Yeah. She was really cool.
She was great. I loved her interview. And so if you're listening and you're in Pennsylvania, just a reminder that Election Day is November 7th. And also, Election Day everywhere is November 7th. Yeah,
that's
Virginia, New Jersey, also vote for mayor in New York if you're here.
Yeah, that's probably, we know what's going to happen there, but
you never know. We've had Republican mayors before.
That's true.
So those are my Wonder Women. It's Azia Bibi and Chrissy Houlihan for two very different reasons.
Cool.
Also, do you have dates?
I don't know.
While you pull up dates, I'll also say open enrollment for healthcare is now until...
Listen to Ariel. She needs it.
I need to feel like I'm helping.
You need healthcare.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Your voice sounds fucked up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I have health insurance. Thank you so much. Until December 15th. There are a few states that have extensions, which you can look up online. In New York, the extension open enrollment is open until January 31st, but that's only for New York. There are a couple of other states that have them, but Google it, and in general, just operate under the assumption that you have until December 15th to sign up for healthcare. Okay, tomorrow at 7 o'clock, I will be doing a half hour with Maria Wojciechowski at the Footlight Bar. Cool. So come to that.
That's Tuesday?
Yeah. November 7th at 7 o'clock. 7 at 7. Election Day. Thursday, November 9th, I'll be at Stand Up New York at 10 o'clock. And we will be... All Female Reboot is going to be back November 18th at 7 o'clock at the Tank Theater in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
And then... December 11th, again, just a reminder, that week I'm going to be doing a week at the Creek. So that's December 11th through the 15th at 7 o'clock every night, where I will be doing a half hour.
Cool. I don't really have anything to plug.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening. We love you, and keep making history.